another video on faffing around with the gluten that I extracted from some flour, and I was thinking at the end of the video, I was kind of thinking, well, if flour is basically just gluten and the starch, and we wash the starch away from the gluten, and we're left with the gluten and the starch is washed away, then why can't we take another starch and add it to that gluten and make a bread out of that starch? So I've made some oat flour, which is pretty straightforward. You just kind of grind up some rolled oats and then sift it to get like a fine flour. So that's going to be the starchy bit, and then I've got some of the seitan gluten left over. So I worked out that it was about 240 grams worth of gluten per, well, I washed out 240 grams worth of gluten from 500 grams worth of strong flour. So that's kind of the kind of ratio that we're going on. So I'm going to go for 240 grams worth of the gluten, and then we'll do the rest in the and then so it'll be the 260 grams worth of the oat flour, and there'll be a little bit of gluten in the oat flour, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Oh, look at that, almost the right amount, but that's put a bit more in for a bit of luck, just to kind of make sure. Yeah, so that's slightly over, that's fine. What I did do last time was I got the weight of the water a little bit messed up, so I ended up having to put more water in. No, more flour in, because obviously the gluten is a little bit wet. So I'm going to cut down the water this time. So I've already activated a little bit of yeast. Yeah, sub little interesting type thing. This yeast is 2 years past its sell-by date, so it's dried yeast and it's 2 years past its sell-by date, and it's still okay. So that's kind of quite interesting, isn't it? So don't always believe dates on packets. Activate it with a little bit of sugar and water and see if it's still working. So that's 50 grams of the water in there. So it was 300 grams of water that we added the last time, which was too much. So we'll go for 150. So we'll do it that way around. So that's 50 in there. So we just need to add another 100. And then I'm going to incorporate a few ideas that I do with sourdough. So we're going to mix the dough into a shaggy mess first, and then we're going to let it sit for an hour before we knead it. So it's just a case of mixing it all together. Start off with seitan can go in, and then if we need to add a little bit more water, I'll just weigh it out. But it looks like we might be okay. I don't know how this is going to turn out. I have no real idea. But I was just curious, because you think, well, if I'm just washing the starch out of it, then surely we can put a different starch back into it. So certain flours don't make bread, or aren't particularly very good at making bread. So maybe we can take those flours and add some extra gluten to them and turn it into a bread flour. Does that make sense? I don't know. It takes a while to kind of get it going. I think it needs more. I mean, it's not just pure starch. Maybe I should have used some cornstarch if I just wanted like a pure starch. But I don't know. But there again, what I washed out of the yeast, the flour in the first place, wasn't just pure cornstarch. There was other things going on in there as well. So hopefully by making an oat flour, then that's what will happen. So does it need a bit more water? Yes, it does. Let's put in another 25 grams. Yeah, another 25 grams. slightly over, so don't put all that in. It's about 25 grams. I want some salt as well, so just a good pinch of salt. Yeah, so salt's a funny thing. Depending on which type of salt you use, you kind of want to be using different amounts. So certain salts are saltier. I've added too much water now. No, I think we'll be fine once we get it going. Might have to add maybe I've added too much water, but it's got. I'm going to leave it for an hour. Kind of rest. That should be okay. I'm going to leave it for an hour in this state, and then that'll just mean the water's got a good opportunity to completely saturate all the flour and all get back into the gluten, which you don't normally do when you're making bread. When you're making normal bread, when I mean normal bread, I mean normal bread with fast-acting yeast, not like a sourdough. So you leave that for an hour, and it gives the water a good time completely saturate all that, and then you can normally get away with adding more water. Which you faff around with hydration with sourdough. I don't fully understand it. I don't understand why you have to add so much water. I think it obviously improves the structure of the bread, so you get the big like air holes in the bread. I think that's down to the amount of water that you put into the sourdough. I think. I'm not 100% sure, and I don't think loads of people kind of quite understand that either. So they know how to make sourdough, they know how to make it really nice. They don't actually understand the chemistry behind it all. But anyway, so we'll leave that for an hour, and then we'll give it knead for 10 minutes, and then we'll see how we go. Right, it's had an hour, so let's give it a knead. It's not all fully mixed in, but it'll be fine. If we need to add a bit more water, we'll kind of cross that bridge when we get to it. Looking kind of quite wet, so we might need to add a bit of flour. I haven't got any more oat flour, so I'll just add a bit of plain flour to it. You never know what's going to happen. I'll just give it a knead, and then we'll see what kind of dough it turns into. It's looking a bit grey and a bit wholemealy. We'll see. You never know. It's quite cold. I'm going out, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it in the fridge to proof. Normally, like fast-acting yeast is fast-acting yeast, so you kind of need to start it and make it straight away, but we can slow the process down by proving it in the fridge. Let's see how this goes. It's nice and plenty of gluten to it. It's nice and stretchy. I'll just see if it comes together. But anyway, I'll give it 10 minutes, which I should have started the timer on, and then we'll see how it turns out. I'll just get a bit of flour out. Where is it? Plain flour. I'll put a bit of plain flour in. I didn't really want to use plain flour, but I didn't have any more oat flour, and I've added a bit too much liquid to it. But we live and learn, don't we? So it's a sticky mess, and I've added an extra 100 grams of the plain flour. So what I'm going to do is I've got to go out, so I can't be faffing around with it too much longer. A bit more flour now. No, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's let it prove until it doubles in size, and then I'll see how it looks. It might soak up some of that bit of flour, but we might just knead in for another 10 minutes, another 100 grams of flour. I think that'll be better. So maybe I should use cornstarch. But anyway, so that's what we'll do. We'll let it prove. I'm going to put it in the fridge. I'm going out for at least 4 hours, maybe 5. So it'll prove slowly in the fridge, and then that'll be fine. And then we can always knead in some more dough to it. But it's a bit sticky. It's got that's a nice bit of gluten to it. You know, that's a nice bit of gluten structure to it. Just a bit sticky, a little bit too sticky. So it might need like another 100 grams worth of plain flour added to it. But we'll see. It's proved but in a bit of a funny way. So I was thinking I probably should have added, instead of plain flour, I should have added self-raising flour because it seems a bit wet. And it's not kind of, the yeast is active, but it's not kind of risen in a great way, but it's got a bit of elasticity to it. So let's give it a knockback. And if we need to add some more flour, add some more. Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad. If we need to add some more flour, we'll add some strong white flour. Because if we add plain flour to it, it's not the kind of right gluten kind of content. So let's see how we go. It's dried out a bit, but that's not so bad. That's not so bad. Now it's had time to rise a bit. So I think we're going to get a bit more rise out of that. So we've knocked it back and we'll put it in the proving basket. It's a bit late to cook it now, but we'll put it back in the fridge. It's been out for a couple of hours, that's why it's risen. But it didn't rise anything. It didn't rise at all when I had it in the fridge. It's quite sticky. I don't want to need that anymore. So proving basket. And we'll dust it with a bit of flour, and hopefully it won't stick, and then we'll put it in the fridge overnight and kind of see what happens. So sourdough technique of folding it in on itself, and then it should just be, there we go, we can do that. So wet doughs are sticky, and it takes just a bit of practice and a little bit of confidence to get to the stage where you can handle them and them not end up stuck all over your hands, which I've only just got to the stage of. So we're pulling the dough tight, so we're doing that kind of motion, squeezing the top down, pushing it underneath and pushing it in on itself, so it creates that ball, and then we get that at the bottom, and that goes into a proving basket. It's quite a heavy dough, so flour on top in case it wants to explode into life overnight, and then shower cap on because we don't like plastic waste and we can use it again, and then in the fridge overnight. We've got a nice bit of rise on that. I don't know how it's going to turn out, so we'll find out. So I need a cloth for the pan. See if we can do it one-handed. So, stinking hot cast iron pot, bread in. Slice down one side so you should get that nice split open, and then lid on, spray one side of the bread there, which will give us a nice crust. We don't spray on the bit that we've just sliced because it will want to, I'll burn my cloth, because it will want to, if we spray on the slice, it wants to seal the slice up will the steam from the water, so we don't do that. So in the oven, half an hour, we'll see how it turns out. Let's have a look. Oh, that's quite heavy, is that? I would have thought it would have given a bit more rise in the oven. That's a bit heavy as well. I can put this, it's not going to burn. That's going to be really heavy as a loaf. It's kind of got that. Maybe no, because it proved it should have. The general heat of the oven normally makes it want to expand more. We'll have a look at it in a bit. We'll let it cool, and then we'll cut into it. It's cooled enough. Let's have a look. Feels heavy. Well, that's not so bad. It's not so bad. It's not a huge. It's heavy though. But it's not a disaster. It's not a disaster. I'll do something with it. I might turn it into a crisp bread. I don't know. Um, mm, it's not that nice as a bread. So even though it's a bit heavy, it doesn't actually taste nice. It's not like a particularly, like a sourdough is delicious, you know, made from wheat flour. That's made from oat flour, and it's not something you kind of, it's alright at a push, but you wouldn't crave more of it, you know. But if you had to, that was your only option. You could you could make bread out of oat flour. So there we go. I've got a bit of seitan left. So let's see what it's like if we can combine that with a bit of cornstarch. So I'll weigh. I just need to set the timer for something. So I'll weigh what this seitan is. And then is it like a bit of I can't remember. And then I'll weigh out some corn flour, and we'll kind of see how much it needs together. So 90 grams of seitan. Was it 200? Was it 240? Was it about half? About half the amount. Yeah, I'll just pause and I'll get out some. No, I'll stop because I've got something else to do in a couple of minutes. Right, out of interest, let's see how the seitan mixes with some cornstarch. So 90 grams of seitan, about 100 grams worth of cornstarch. I'm not entirely sure how much water to add yet. I'll find out. There was a little bit of water in the container. This is what I stored the seitan in. So I'll kind of have to see what happens. So essentially what came out of the seitan was cornstarch. There was a little bit of fibrous material as well, so obviously flour is made up of starch, gluten and a bit of fibrous material. So I don't think it wants to make much water at all. And that's kind of drying the seitan out. Alright, so let's add a little bit of water. Like 10 grams. Another 10 grams into that. I don't think I'm going to turn this into bread. Although I have got a little bit of yeast. In fact, I have got a bit of yeast out already. So it's fast acting, but we can add it here. Just a smidgen. And let's pretend we'll make a bread roll. More than enough yeast, probably too much. So another 10 grams. That's 15. Oops, not sorry. Probably the right amount. Probably all go in. Right, to the board. We'll see if we can knead that together. See if it rises. I'll just keep an eye on it. I'm going to be in today. Well, for the next few hours anyway. So let's see if this will knead in together. It should do. I can't see why it won't. Although, because the oat bread was, it wasn't the nicest tasting bread, maybe like a corn flour, using like a corn starch, corn flour, it's not going to taste, there's going to be no kind of flavour to it, because corn flour doesn't taste of anything, really, and gluten's not going to taste of much, so maybe it's the other things in the bread that kind of give it the flavour. And certainly when making sourdough you get a lot of flavour from the actual. That's okay. That's making quite a nice dough. That's surprising. So I'll pick up any more bits out of there. It looks like it's going to make a nice smooth dough, which it would do because it's very fine flour, it's corn flour. But we'll give this a knead for 10 minutes and then we'll kind of have a look at it and we'll see what happens. But it's mixed into it. It's a nice soft dough already. So we'll kind of see. We'll kind of see how that turns out. We're making pizza tonight, actually. I'm making pizza tonight. So we'll see how we go. That might be okay. That might be okay. Probably could have done with that 5 grams less of water, but we live and learn, don't we? Having to add some more corn flour because it's gone really, really, really wet through the kneading process. Shouldn't actually need to knead it because the kneading part is the activation of the gluten. So the gluten's already come together into long strands, and then we're just incorporating some flour back into it. So it shouldn't need. It should only really need mixing. It shouldn't need kneading, but the kneading process is just working all that cornstarch and water into it. That'll do. It's only a bit of an experiment. It's nice soft dough. So I think it's got the yeast in it. Give it a bit of salt. I like some of that flavour to it. So just knead it to get the salt in, so it's equally distributed. And then we'll put it in a bowl. And we'll give it see if it rises, and see what happens with it. We might just cook it as a flatbread. I think that'd be more interesting. But look, it's starting to do that already, which I don't want to add any more corn flour to it. It's alright, but you just need to be a bit careful with it. Right, we've got a bowl. Let's see what happens with it. We can always knead it a bit more. Roll it out with a bit of flour. Right, that's that. So it's kind of risen a little bit, but it's don't know. I don't think it's going to taste very nice. It's, yeah, that's not going to be very nice. It was an interesting experiment, but I don't think that's going to be anything worth eating. It's basically going to be like Play-Doh. Kind of a nice idea. Kind of a nice idea. You know. But that's just, doesn't feel like nice dough. You know, like a bread dough is nice and soft and kind of feels good. That just feels like when you add water to corn flour and it doesn't particularly feel nice. It feels chalky, does corn flour, and I think that's going to be the same as well. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I'm not going to bother cooking that. I think it'll just be a bit of a failure, and I'm just going to put it in the bin, I think. Yeah, I don't know. Nice idea. I don't know. There's always things to what we call it to think about, isn't there? I don't know. Shall I cook it as a flatbread? I mean, I've just spat that bit back into it. It's like what we call it, like a heathen. But I don't know. It would be. I've done the work. Haven't I? I might as well cook it, even though I've put that bit that was in my mouth back in there. I've got something I can cook it in. Let's roll it out into a round, and then I'll cook it in a frying pan, and we'll cook it like a flatbread, and we'll kind of see what kind of happens to it. It seems silly not to do the work and not to cook it, even though I kind of already know how it's going to turn out. There's not much spring to it. It doesn't want to spring back into shape. You never know. It might be delicious. I mean, people make cornbread, don't they? Which is, surely that's potato starch. Right, I'll give it a fry. I'll fry it, and we'll see how it turns out. I don't know. Let's not do a whole of it. The frying pan's not big enough. Roll it out again. But it's not sticking to the board, is it? And that's not because I've got some great skill with dough. Right. We'll fry that. We'll see how it turns out. Yeah. It's not particularly very good. It's just a bit bland. It's just a bit bland. And a bit flat. Well, it's a flat bread. It's a flat bread, isn't it? But yeah. So no, it doesn't particularly work. And the oat flour wasn't particularly nice tasting. The corn flour is not anything amazing taste wise. So kind of puts a stop to that kind of experiment. Oh, there are other types of flour that lack a bit of gluten. You know, something like a buckwheat flour lacks a bit of gluten. And the same with a bit of spelt, really, could do with a bit more gluten in it. So, which are kind of quite interesting flours to taste. So, I think that's probably when and if I ever faff around again with making some seitan and adding it to different flours to kind of up the gluten content. I think using flours that you would use, so I've got some buckwheat flour. So I'll have a look at buckwheat flour breads, and then we'll have a go at see if that actually works in putting in buckwheat to kind of improve the kind of gluten, the gluten content of it, and therefore make a like a nicer buckwheat bread, because buckwheat's got a kind of flavour to it, and so spelt as well. But I don't think oat or corn flour, corn starch, has the kind of flavour to it. They're both a bit boring. But anyway, there we go. Interesting all the same. Well, I find it interesting.